Saya tidak akan mengambil banyak masa sebagai kerana kita akan mendengar pembentangan oleh kedua-dua ahli panel. Tiap-tiap seorang akan diberi kira-kira 20 minit untuk membentang dan selepas itu kita akan buka kepada soal jawab. Jadi tanpa melengahkan masa, saya jemput Profesor Datuk Muhammad Nasir.
Boleh nampak slide saya?
Boleh.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Anda salam sejahtera. Terima kasih kerana dijemput dalam webinar ni on food security. Saya akan cakap bahasa Inggeris kerana slide saya dalam bahasa Inggeris. I will discuss basically on the issues and also the some policy option, some policy responses. And of course, the second panelist, Prof. Fatimah, will discuss more on the relationship with the pandemic. So first, of course, I will discuss about the issues, mainly on addressing emerging threats and challenges. Second, on the food security situation. Thirdly, on the policy consideration, and of course, finally on the policy option. Now, looking at the issues, I think these basically are well-known policies, basically. Talking about the feeding and increasing population. As you know that, the global population is expected to increase by more than 9 billion by 2050. And in Malaysia alone, we expect that 41.5 million by 2040. Of course, there are more of it. Not only talking about our own, this is talking about our own population. Of course, we have many immigrants and also the non-citizens of our country. Second, on the emerging trend is, of course, as our country is growing, our economy is improving, then of course the income grows. Not only in terms of income growth, but more importantly, of the per capita income has been increasing over the years. And of course, deal with effect the shifting diets of the population and also in terms of consumption pattern. We'll discuss a bit later. And this translated into low SSL for main food item and also rising trade deficit. Not only because our trade deficit has been, food trade deficit has been increasing over the years. And the data in 2018 indicate that about negative 18.6 billion. Next, on urbanization. We are not talking only urbanization here, where currently about 70% of our population are in urban areas, but we are talking about accelerating urbanization. The thing is that urban areas, generally, although we have urban farming, all this, but the issue are generally urban areas are net buyer of food. Next will be on the climate change. This is very true, especially for our country, tropical areas. The prediction is that if we don't do any significant mitigation and also adaptation strategies, of course, the yield will decline by about 15%. Of course, this is a prediction by IFRI. And next will be, this is, old issue, but still significant in terms of low adoption of technology by small farmers and also lacks of entrepreneurship. And last, of course, these are not by all means not exhaustive, but anyway, these are some of the issues. Is the multifunctional of agriculture. Some have positive externalities, some also have negative externalities. In relation to pandemic, I think this is what I think Prof. Fatimah will discuss later. That this is, of course, food security is more concerned now with GDP expected to contract by 4.5%. This, of course, affecting the income and also the purchasing power, the capacity to purchase by 2040, and also unemployment is expected to increase by to 4.2% in 2020. So this, of course, in terms of, because we're talking about food security, it's not only talking about availability of food, but also talking about accessibility, the purchasing power by our population. Based on the Global Food Security Index 2019, actually, as far as ranking is concerned, we are a bit or quite comfortable actually. but we are ranked 28 out of 113 countries. But remember, this is talking about food security, and because when talking about food security, it's not only in terms of availability of food, it's not only talking about capacity of all our country to produce food, but talking about affordability, talking about accessibility of food, talking about quality and safety of food. This is basically the ranking. Yeah? But if we look at the global hunger index, because normally food security index normally talking about at the national level, but we are talking about global hunger index. Actually, we are not, although we are not that serious, but we are not low. So Malaysian position is about the same as in Philippines, Indonesia, but Thailand somehow is much better than us in terms of the global hunger index. But these are some selected statistics. Turkey, for example, they are low, less than 5, and also China less than 5. So although our global food security index, we are a bit comfortable, but looking at the global hunger index, I think there are some concerns here. Now, talking about food insecurity or hunger in Malaysia, these are, of course, there are several studies. These are examples of 2 studies. By Rushida, for example, actually about 13.4% of adult Malaysian actually they skip meals and reduce the size of meal because of the financial constraint. Of course, the figure is higher in East Malaysia compared to Peninsula, and rural areas is higher compared to urban. But I don't understand why rural areas, there are more hungry people in rural areas compared to urban areas. Actually, we can find anything in Malaysia. But anyway, this is some of the studies. And also, study by Zalila indicate that food insecure household where they have many children tend to use expenditure on children education. They tend to borrow money to buy food and reduce number of meals. So these are some picture of the scenario of the hunger in Malaysia. So this then begs issues. What are the challenges in the supply and also demand sectors of food equation? Secondly, what are the possible policy responses? Talking about food supply, of course, you can understand, in general, the productivity or the yield in developed countries tend to be higher compared to developing countries. But our concern here is that among the developing countries, our yield, our productivity, of course, this is some example, they measure yield, cereal yield, we are lower compared to, for example, Bangladesh, compared to Laos for that matter. So this is something that we have to concern, our yield is much lower compared to other developing countries. And these are some probably other than, of course, people say that, because of structural issues, small farm, low adoption technology, old farmers, and of course, the lack of entrepreneurship. These are some in the literature where our yield is lower compared to other developing countries for the matter. But looking at the R&D intensity as measured by the percentage of agriculture GDP, Thailand, for example, the percentage is increasing, the intensity is increasing. But ours, if you look at the graph, is declining. Of course, the baseline of Thailand is much lower compared to us. But then, of course, the some concern that our intensity, R&D intensity is lower. This could be probably the budget is about the same, but that percentage-wise is over the years. So this is some area that we have to bear in mind. So of course, as translated into low SSL for food main item and also rising food trade deficit. Looking at the food demand, this is some of the implication of from our study. This is I think this is from thesis basically on income diversity. So basically, we have higher income let's say for wheat-based product than rice product. So this means that as our countries is improving, our economy is improving, the demand for wheat-based products can increase more compared to the rice products, and decline in per capita consumption of food. Of course, certain studies indicate that the demand for the income elasticity for rice has been negative. That means rice is inferior good. Of course, this is depend on the level on the income part. Right? And then, of course, the income elasticity for meat, fish, fruit, vegetable. So this means that as our country is improving, our economy is improving, our income is improving. Of course, the demand for meat, fish, fruit, vegetable are going to increase. Of course, within the meat, red meat increase more than the white meat. Looking at price fluctuation, price issue. In Malaysia, we look at the CPI, the weightage of CPI. Of course, food is still the highest component at about 29, currently about 29.5%. Of course, this includes liquor and non-alcoholic beverages. But of course, if we deduct the non-alcoholic beverages, but still, I think still the highest component. So, of course, more concern in food production actually, not only in developing countries, but also in developed countries, is the inelasticity of demand and supply. So what we mean here is that, you know, any small changes in the supply, any small changes in demand. Of course, demand normally is stable, demand for food, but mainly on the small changes in supply, of course, the price tends to fluctuate a lot. Yeah? Looking about the food waste, this is, although we are talking about, you know, food insecurity, hunger in Malaysia, but this is how I think our behavior. That Malaysian in general, we throw away about 50,000 tons of food waste per day, talking about per day. And 60% of this 15,000 tons translated to 8,000 tons are actually avoidable food waste. And of that 80,000 tons, actually 3,000 tons is actually still edible and ration well. And this is data from SW Corp, and feed approximately 2 million people. Yeah? Yeah. Well, policy responses, this is my last part. Of course, we're talking about food security, because food security talking about availability of food, talking about accessibility of food, talking about utilization of food, talking about stability of food. So therefore, any kind of a policy must try to improve or enhance the food supply, access to food, in terms of food quality and safety and sustainability of food. So in any policy consideration, before we formulate new policies or the current policies, of course, we have to tackle both in the demand and also in the supply side. In the demand, of course, normally talking about improvement in employment, improvement in income, food preferences, food price stabilization, talking about safety net program, not only for farmers, but also for consumers at large. And of course, in terms of food supply, then mainly, not only in developing countries like us, but also in developed countries, talking about, you know, intervention in both input and output market. We have a lot of tariff, talking about import quota, and developed countries, for example, they have like deficit payment, like retirement, all these are basically try to distort the price and also output market, or try not only distorting, but the purpose is to promote, to encourage the food production, and also provision of public goods such as infrastructure and R&D. And one more thing also that we have to consider is that our small farmers, smallholder producers should be able to participate in the whole value chain of agribusiness, not only at the local level, but if not international, at least at the national levels. One more thing is that in any kind of policy consideration, we have to remember that there are a lot of what we call market failure or externalities here. So our policy should be concerned with correcting the market failure and efficiency issues. Talking about private optimality versus social optimality, and of course, literature indicate that the market failure is more widespread in developing countries compared to developed countries. So this market failure, actually, when we correct market failure, is talking about food investment. The return from food investments should not be only in terms of private optimality, not talking about private return, but it must be talking about social return. The return must be of stability of the country, peacefulness of the country. So this is where, how can we converge the private optimality more or less close to the social optimality. And second, of course, concern about the distribution of income. So these are some of the, on the right side of the slide, talking about some of the factors that cause market failure, price volatility, as mentioned just now, due to the inelasticity of supply demand. Environmental costs, which is negative externality of farming, food processing, and so forth. Of course, at the same time, food production, agriculture has some positive externality, for example, like environmental conservation. And also in agribusiness chain, we have a lot of monopoly power, meaning that a lot of producers, a lot of sellers, but buyers. So this is normally where the price normally is determined by the buyer or sellers, for example. And of course, existing public goods such as research output. So, on the policy option then, my approach here is more talking about correcting the market failure, okay? Improving the parity return. So I have my friend normally when they come to Malaysia. So everywhere they say they can see a lot of oil palm, from the airport to UK, everywhere on the right side, on the left side of the road is oil palm. So this indicates basically the return from oil palm is higher. It does not mean that food production is not lucrative, but talking about relative return in palm oil is higher. That's the reason why the main oil palm in our country. So in the issue then, how can we improve the parity return and market failure food production vis-a-vis industrial crop? So meaning that investment in food production, the return must be at least at par with the industrial crop production. So we have to devise a mechanism or instrument in such a way that the return in food production at least equal to industrial crop production investment. Second, in terms of how can we emulate a plantation crop model? You see, our pacik-pacik in kampung actually, the smallholder, kelapa sawit smallholder, for example, or palm smallholder, they cannot survive actually if they don't have, if in that area there is no plantation or at least there is mills. Yeah? So this is the coexistence between plantation and also smallholders nicely in such a way that can spur the growth of oil palm industry. So this probably we can follow the models of plantation crop in the food production. So of course we need a fiscal or monetary incentive in food production investment. Thirdly, also talking about market failure, multifunctionality of agriculture, payment of environmental services. So we have to devise a policy in such a way that we pay the environmental services of our farmers, not only of the produce that we pay the produce, but also in terms of how can we pay the environmental service. So this, I think, if we can do that, of course, we'll improve the production of food. Of course, next we'll be talking capacity building, all this investment in agro-entrepreneurship, precision farming, high-tech, and so forth. In terms of accessibility, I think this is a big feature. 1 or 2 minutes more. Sustainable food consumption. We are not talking about certain food production, but also sustainable food consumption, food bank program, urban farming, and so forth. In terms of utilization, mainly of food safety, this is also talking about market failure. How can we improve market failure, converging the private and social mobility in food safety, food processing, and food production, so that the produce, the agriculture output, agriculture produce is very safe, a certain level of quality and safe to the consumers. So we have to devise certain MBI and market-based instrument in such way that that the return of having better quality food is compensated by the additional cost. So this is where, of course, the industry or the producer, if not mandated, if there is no incentive, they will produce output which have the return to them, highest return to them. Of course, what we need is social return, so that because the negative effects of consuming unquality food is one called negative externality. Next class, we'll be talking about, this has not been mentioned actually in budget 2021, talking about adequate stockholding in the form of strategic food security, especially in the pandemic now. So I don't know how much is our stockholding, for example, like rice and so forth. But I think we have to be very concerned at least any kind of catastrophe or any kind of pandemic like this happen again, then of course we have adequate stockholding. So generally, I think I have taken about 20 minutes time. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much. Hello? Prof. Chamuri? Ya, unmute. Prof. Chamuri have to unmute.
Prof. Cham, boleh unmute ya?
Unmute.
Mute dah. Okay, you heard me?
Okay, terus.
Okay, go ahead, Fatima.
Yeah, can you full screen of my PowerPoint? Alia, could you put it in full screen? Assalamualaikum. Good morning, everyone. My friends, my ex-students, my many good friends. All right. My role today is to discuss about loops, yeah, between food security and supply chain, food security and supply chain loops, the need for an inclusive and resilient food system. Next. Okay. Right, the lines of discussion covers those questions. We look at the COVID-19 cases in Malaysia as a backdrop for this issue. Malaysia's food security and supply chain loops, what do they mean to us? What does pandemic reveal about our food supply chain in the last MCO and the various types of categories of MCO? The disruption in supply chain, how much is due to structural and or technical? And of course, what would be a better supply chain beyond pandemic? Right, guys, sorry about the colorful graph. I meant it to be for the students so that it attracts their attention and to give a maximum expansion. This is the situation of our COVID-19 in the country. Next. Next, right. Look at figure 2. Look at figure 2. Yes, figure 2 tells the whole story of our COVID incident. Today is yesterday was 304th day. Look at the curve beyond September. So this is the third wave. We don't know when we will flatten. So what I'm trying to say is by 2021, we are still grappling with COVID-19 assault. So be prepared for that, and that will affect our supply chain. And figure 3 shows the differences in the rate of cases every day since 1st March until yesterday. So the third wave is very aggressive, and I think it will last for some time in the next year. Next. Right, the characteristic of pandemic shock, unlike the shocks that we had before, for example, in 2008 or 1971 or 1987, the typology of this shock is different from the rest for the following reason. Number one, it is global phenomena, and it affects both supply side as well as demand side. And the introduction of the new norms, either in our lifestyle or business operations, such as physical distancing, the importance of hygiene, the importance of community responsibility, both domestic as well as collective effort coordination from all the countries in the world. And the last one, uncertainty of the timeline or life cycle of the pandemic. So this is quite a challenging matrix to face. Next. With that background, guys, the next issue is look at the. Can you go back earlier? Malaysia's food security and supply chain loops. What do they mean? Okay, Prof. Nasir has shown you the level of self-sufficiency. Next, Alia. All right, next. Okay, so I would like you to focus on this graph. As you can see, except for eggs, none of our food has shown some improvement between 1990 to 2018, despite the 4 policy agricultural documents, right? What it means to supply chain is that, number one, food sector has been undervalued and neglected all these years, as mentioned by Prof. Nasir, in terms of R&D allocation, in terms of emphasis, and in terms of focus, right? And it also shows we have failed to induce in production growth of our food sector, except for pork, as well as poultry meat and eggs. Right, next. This is the import dependence ratio. Next. So the implication to supply chain is that when we import a lot, we also import the inflationary effects as well, particularly for fossil fuel fertilizer, as well as machines, as well as other agricultural inputs, yeah? And dependence on import means we are allowing the growing stronghold of international conglomerates, yeah, such as all the big fertilizer company, as well as the hyper and retail sectors, proven by slow growth of input sector development as well as stagnant smallholder sector, respectively, because of the growing presence of input conglomerates as well as retail companies, retail big companies. Next.
What we need to do then is to regularly test, assess, and improve. You may actually, some of you may
Sorry. All right. Okay. I just want to introduce to you a loop concept, or basically feedback relationship between COVID-19 incidents or COVID-19 symptoms with food security. I know this is a bit can be difficult to grasp, but follow my thoughts. You can start with the COVID-19 and the symptoms that led to lockdown, and that led to area movement control. The moment you control the area, the travel between areas, that resulted in the altered labor as well as fertilizer distribution. Therefore, it affects cost of production, and therefore it affects the price paid to the producers. Therefore, it affects food production and their return or income. All this will affect the three pillars of food security, such as accessibility, availability, and dietary pattern. And assuming that income is low, that will affect dietary pattern, as shown by study by UNICEF in the early years this year, and that will affect the food security status, affect their health vulnerability, and therefore that symptoms of what it could be COVID-19 or other diseases will affect our producers as well as consumers. Yes, and then you go back to the point of income, where income is. Supposedly the situation is worse when income is much reduced. That will affect their capacity or ability to pay for input, be it labor or fertilizer, and therefore affect their cost of production, affect their profitability, affect their income, and affect their food status or food security status, and that will also affect health and so on. So the loop goes. What I'm trying to say here, there is a feedback loop or circular causality or interconnectedness between food security and COVID-19 incidents. That's the message I want to relay to you. Next graph. Next graph is about the relationship between food supply chain, the importance of food supply chain under pandemic now as well as in the years to come. So let's go back to the red box. Supposedly COVID-19 continues, yes, and lockdown will be instituted, although in a different format. That will affect again the labor supply, input supply, and that will affect cost of production. That will increase cost of production. They will affect price as well as production as well as their income, and income will affect the consumption of input, fertilizer, and labor, and it goes back to the cost of production. So it is a loop within the big loop, a production loop. Assuming income is low because of all this problem, it will affect their dietary pattern, and again will make them a susceptible group to COVID-19 symptoms, and the loop continues. But look at the orange loop, which I call sustainability loop. If you alter the labor supply, restricted the input distribution, we know under pandemic farmers couldn't access good fertilizer, don't have enough money, enough capital to buy better input or better machine. That will affect their farm practices and therefore sustainability, right? So sustainability will be it affects income, and the whole dynamics will continue. So what I'm trying to say is there is relationship between supply chain as well as pandemic, as well as production, as well as sustainability. There is a big loop between them. So what it means is that we need a sustained as well as inclusive supply chain to ensure health and livelihood, be it for farmers or be it for consumers as well as the market players. Next. Next, we will discuss what does pandemic reveal about our food supply chain. These are the revelation of that I have observed in the last MCO and so on. Next. All right. The first line is the normal supply chain. The second line is the first few days of MCO when they were panicked. We were not sure where to get our supplies, right? Of course, government came in, pharma, PPK, and so on, but it was a bit destructive. And then the wholesaler center was closed down, and the small retailers were asked to, to shut down their business. Look at the third line. And in the end, the supply chain revolve between the input supplier, producer, wholesaler, supermarket, sidelining the small traders, ataupun the small pasar malam traders and so on. So they were the unlucky one. They were marginalized, particularly those that are cut off from communication. They suffer a lot, right? And of course, the silver lining and the MCO is the emergence of our young entrepreneurs. Yeah, for you guys, young entrepreneurs who have the ICT apps to help direct marketing of vegetables and fruits and food from producer to consumer. Next. All in all, this what I think what pandemic revealed to us about our food supply chain. Number one is asymmetric effect. In other words, due to COVID, large-scale retailers are preferable to small transitional markets such as pasar malam, and these are the lot of the subsectors that are affected very badly. Yeah, but they are the retail centers which are frequented by low and medium income consumers. Similarly, we have a pandemic caused disproportionate effect on the major players, particularly those in the informal sector or daily paid workers, micro SMEs involved in logistics or marketing or direct trading. Small farmers are badly affected, especially those in the retail, logistics, eateries, hospitality, tourism, and tourism industries. But they are major players in the supply chain. And it shows very clearly. Of course, this problem are there. Yeah, were there before pandemic, but it has been shown in the open. Yeah, so foreign labor dependency at all levels of supply chain, from the farm to logistic to transportation to wholesaler to retail level, until even at the supermarkets and so on. So when they fled home, farmers faced short labor supply which affected their production. And of course, yesterday was 1,884 cases because of foreign workers. Top gloves, of course, they earn billions, but the accommodation problem, the workers are located at a very cramped place, and it is very fertile for disease transmission. So this is our, the bad side of foreign workers. I remember in the first few months of the COVID, when they show the Myanmar workers are living in the wholesale market at Selayang, right? And they are so dirty and so on. Due to restrictive and expensive input during MCO, it has affected the usage of input, particularly fertilizer and other input, distribution to the producers, affecting cost, yield, and production. And we also saw the poor infrastructure and logistics, particularly, for example, in the wholesale facilities, unhygienic. Remember the Wuhan case. There is a high probability that the virus came from Wuhan wholesale market that sold bats and pangolin, where there is a transfer of virus from animal to human. I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but this is one possibility. Unorganized and limited recycling activities, hence it is inefficient. And of course, lastly, we saw digitalization at work in helping the flow of food from farm to consumers. Next. Okay, so I need to kind of find out whether this disruption, are they due to technical factors or structural? Okay, next. There are three subsectors in supply chain, or I call it supply chain divide. All right, there's no value. Number one is small farmer marketing, which are serving 65 to 70% of the consumers, and there are about 700 case farmers in this area: fruits, vegetables, fisheries, and livestock. They could not survive lockdown, most of them, right? And there are many channels there, from producer to collector to wholesaler, retailer, consumer, and also involvement of farmer as well as producer. They go to pasar malam, sell direct to consumers, and also they also sell direct to consumers. So these are the traditional or transitional supply chain. They are informal, but they are equitable because there are many of them. There are dynamics, is free entry, free exit, but low return. Most of them are poor, yeah, and they couldn't survive the lockdown. The other one is large-scale retail supply chain, serving about 30 to about 1/3 of the consumers, yeah, mainly the high-end or high middle income consumers. This is very sustainable because they are capital driven. They are able to diversify their businesses. They could withstand shock, but they are highly concentrated. There are only a few of them. I've forgotten already, but when I did the study, they were about less than 2 digits of big time or large scale retailers. Yeah. And they survived total lockdown. Of course, they suffer some losses, but compared to the small traders, they are relatively secured. And we have one other subsector. These are commercial farmers, very enterprising. They are able to sell or to export their high quality produce to Singapore or China. For example, durian and other high grade fish and vegetables and fruits to Singapore and to China. They were able to sustain, but they are selective and discriminatory in the sense that the good one, the high quality ones are exported, but the lousy one, the residuals are meant for all of us. Okay, so there are three subsectors in supply chain there. So next. So okay, back to the question whether it's structural or technical. Structural refers to, there's a note there, institutional and technological impact. Technical refers to non-fundamental impact, and fundamental refers to supply and demand. Okay, so before pandemic, we have already have that problem of inefficient supply, but they are able to deliver food to consumers, and we have that supply chain, as I mentioned earlier, yeah, involving the MNCs, and very minimal integration with small farms. So under pandemic, small farms were sidelined, therefore worsening their income and livelihood, and the supply chain divide widens. Okay, so I would like to share with you our experience with regard to our studies on cocoa as well as paddy and rice. These are the major messages that we have we are convinced that it is a strong fact or a strong argument. In the case of cocoa, guys, the cocoa debacle, you know that cocoa was is no longer they went through a very stellar performance in the late 80s, and now it is left with only 17,000 hectares with 10,000 production of cocoa beans. So we believe that the supply chain divide killed the cocoa industry. And you know very well the prospect for cocoa in this world is dead good, because people are getting richer in China, people are getting richer in Africa, and they eat cocoa. There were about 10K farmers, and yet there were 3 cocoa grinders with minimal integration, meaning there is no symbiotic relationship between the small farmers and the grinders. So when these cocoa smallholders face disease problem and price problem, they have nowhere else to go but to leave their cocoa plants and move to oil palm, right? So the same thing with paddy and rice sector. This is what we have observed. The concentration or the highly concentrated market at both ends. One is the downstream, milling, wholesale, retail, as well as import. They are working closely with each other through joint ventures. So they are very strong, right? And the input sector, it is we only have one single input distributor. So these two situations, two concentrated market at both ends, leave poor prospect for the farmers, or poor mobility or opportunities to go forward, to go backward, right? So that's why they are stuck in their farms for years. And they survive mainly through subsidies and supports from the government. You take away the subsidies, I think they will leave. The industry will collapse. That bad, yeah. So market structure does affect the small farmers and smallholders. Right. So in my opinion, the destruction is also institutional due to policy, structural due to the competition, as well as the organization of the industry, and technical. Structural institutional refers to the lockdown policy or whatever policy that the government has instituted in the past and current. And technical, I think, is the misperception on the government's part that the small farm marketing could not deliver under pandemic, therefore reinforcing their production loop of lower income. Okay, next. So based on that background or backdrop, what kind of supply chain we can propose beyond pandemic? Right. This is what I think based on literatures as well as based on our earlier studies. I think this is well known already. Short-term measures. No doubt that we need to have big data analytics or dashboard to monitor supplies and demands and choke points, right? And also, I think Malaysia has, is aware of this, the need to provide cash transfer to vulnerable group, regulate food stock to avoid hoarding and ensure regular supply. Hygiene, it should be number one. Allow mobility of input, including labor, so that producers can continue producing. Social protection program, this is well known also. But this one, I would like to emphasize on the importance of community-based group. Kita tolong kita, kita bantu kita. There's no other way, there's no other better way through cooperatives. I have proposed cooperatives to the flat dwellers so that they take care of their lives, they take care of the livelihood of the children at the flats and so on, but nobody listened to that. But to me, community-based group is the best viable proposal to improve social well-being under pandemics. Long-term measures, number one, resilient. We cannot underrate the importance of hygienic, right? The hygienic supply chain at all levels. Let's be honest about our supply chain situation. Even in PJ, in KL, our wholesale markets are still dirty, still unorganized, so we need to revive that. We need to restructure that. And it can be done because Thailand could do it. Or if you go to Brunei, you can see that the market is so dead clean. So they can do it as well as Indonesia. Safety of workers. We realized it too late, but Singapore has realized the importance of these workers. Yeah, they live in a cramped environment. And now we have discovered it, and there are many more dormitories like that in under Top Glove companies or other companies. So be prepared for high 4-digit numbers in the coming months. Yeah. So we need to ensure safety as well as the well-being of workers so that they don't reinforce the COVID-19 incidences. And of course, we need to allow to improve the ability, the capacity to buy or to pay labor and input through financial resilience. I saw some papers where large companies, private sector, provide loans to producers by helping them to access input, yeah, and also provide market for them, right? Maybe we allow flexibility in sourcing our input types, our logistics, yeah, by geographic sources. This is in terms of importing our input. And this one, we have forgot about this, right? We need to give subsidies to machines, tools, and high-tech technologies to our farmers. We give them subsidies but on input, but we almost forget about farmers need machines, need tools, particularly high-tech technologies. So we need subsidies in that area. And also, of course, we need to rely on international trade so that we ensure smooth flow of or non-destructive import of food for the country. And of course, the normal macroeconomic ramification as well as institutional support, particularly R&D and the rest. Next. Excuse me. Right. Inclusive. This is how I perceive inclusive supply chain. I would like to reintroduce this concept again, farm to table supply chain. And the theme is protecting our food, protecting our farmers. We need to protect our farmers. Remember the case of cocoa? right? Because of they are divided, they are not integrated with the grinders, and other macroeconomic challenges have drove them out of the industry. So an industry can die out because of the supply chain divide, as well as macroeconomic factors. So if we don't protect our farmers, yeah, our farmers are important, as from Nasir has mentioned. The multifunctional aspect of our farmers is that besides providing food, job, export income, blah blah, but the environmental services, yeah, and the ecological benefits, the equitable distribution, a dynamic rural areas, and of course the good values about food, about environment, and so on. So it has high social return to the society. So therefore, we need to protect our farmers, and by protecting our food, by connecting farmers to buyers, consumers through digitalization and startups. Thomas Redden mentioned what we conceive that it takes us 20 years to achieve, it can be done immediately through ICT. That's the magic of digitalization, right? So the value proposition that I would like to propose is the need for a safe, yeah, clean, fresh local food, traceability, and sustainable farm practices. I mean, you have heard from Prof. Nasir the need for good food to our children, cheap food for the poor, cheap and high quality food for our poor population, because they are the one will be the source of human capital for our country. B40, the so-called B40, right? So if we don't feed them good food, they will be stunted, and it will affect our human capital quality. So we need safe, fresh food, local food, and so on. Or green technology, local green input, and community farming model. The winner of this year 2020 farming models, he has a good proposition where community works together to come up with simple fresh food for home consumption. Yeah. So this is where the youngs, yeah, I can see many young people here in this group. This is where they can come in all aspects, providing new technology, green technology, or green input, or community farming models. And these are the possible startups that they can come up with, connecting farmer direct to consumers. Easy, right? Grab has done it, Kojak has done it, Uber has done it. So you can do the same. And it has been done in surprisingly in Indonesia, right? And you can I can give you the reference later. Connecting farmer direct to consumers. There's one app that can help the farmers to sell to the best consumer, to reach distant areas, yeah, and a wider coverage. Or empowering vegetable hawkers or vegetable small-time traders with network of daily produce distributors, helping them. This is B2B in a small scale. Help them to connect to the distributors so that they get better coverage, and consumers get a good supply as well. Connecting farmers directly to SMEs, right? Okay, so SMEs to process their products, yeah, for value addeds and so on, or retailers or individual consumers. Okay, it can be done easily. Of course, this requires investment in people, yeah, peopleware, skills, peopleware, and of course, high quality digital infrastructure, the hardware and the software, and as well as industry university linkages. Thailand has a very good model for this. We can emulate Thailand on this method. I would emphasize again the importance of collective effort or community-based groups. Whatever model you may want to use. I know in this country, farmers, PPK are not happy when I say cooperative, because they say farmers association is cooperative. Doesn't matter, but as long as it is a community-based group and it is run by farmers for farmers and not by government officers or politicians. The moment you rob this community group, yeah, they fail to survive on their own. That's the problem with Malaysian cooperative and farmer association. To improve countervailing power, powered by digitalization. So the new element here is using digitalization to empower this cooperative or community-based group to help them venture into supply chain beyond their farm, right? And of course, I strongly believe that small machines, small mills, small high technology is a game changer. The word is game changer for the small farmers, because from there they can move beyond their tiny farm to do some processing, to sell whatever products that they have, to sell the unique product to the consumers, either in raw forms or processed and so on. So that, you know, you create creativity, you allow creativity, you allow entrepreneurship among the smallholders so that they can reach the consumers better and improve their lives. Thank you. Over.
Prof Cham, unmute ya.
Need to unmute, Prof.
Unmute, Prof.
Okay. Okay. Is it okay?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. We have heard a lot from the two speakers, and we have about half an hour for discussion. I will now open the floor to comments and questions. Please identify yourself and also your institution, and then your comments or questions. Mention the speaker, please. I open the now. Yes. Anybody to take?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello.
Khairuddin here, Khairuddin.
Yeah. Okay.
Khairuddin here.
Yeah.
Okay. The issue Prof. Fatima already mentioned about community farming.
Yeah.
And so what are the steps taken in order to make it happen in the community? One is the land area, two is the expertise, and the third one is what about the inputs for the community farmers to help out into the production of agriculture?
Yeah, very good question there. I think the government can help at the early stage by providing you know, some fiscal support there. Say by not to say subsidies, but you need to give subsidies. But remember, when you give subsidies, there must be some exit point. In this country, when they give subsidy, is a lifetime right for the farmers. Lifetime right for the farmers and nelayan, you know. Give a kind of an exit exit date, so you subsidize for 1 year and so on, and get the universities coming in and so on, you know. And I think it can be done. It can be done.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
Any more questions?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum. Good morning. My name is Yaakob. I'm with Tropical Food Network. I think there's just 2 points here to say because point number one, actually, basically, the marketing system in Malaysia hasn't changed for the past how many decades, because the guys who call the shots are still the guys in the wholesale market. I mean, that we have to admit it. You know, at one time, they were trying to get rid of the middleman and all that, but it doesn't work because that's not the problem. Yeah. So I think we have to do something to the market system. We can mitigate what's there, but we cannot get rid. You have to have that the middleman and wholesale, because they're the one who run the whole show. So what I'm saying is, what we can do, we can do things like shorten the value chain. So I think that Prof was mentioning about digitalization. Okay, that's part of it. But I think one of the things which we tried to do before was to shorten the value chain. From the farmers right to consumers, we try to bypass whoever's the players in the middle. That's point number one. The second point is, I think there's too much wastage here. From the producer right to the wholesale, when it gets to traders, middlemen, a lot of stuff gets thrown away. I think somebody mentioned in the chat, yes, it's 10 to 20% depending. So most of the small farmers are at the behest. They're the problem. Yeah. This is my my point right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jacob, for a very good insight. I think this age-old problem about the middleman. Number one, we can never kill middlemen. If you kill middlemen, but the functions still survive, right? The functions, we need that function. Even when you not meminang, you need the middleman as well. So that's the role of middleman. But I think I have a strong faith in digitalization, where there are two things here. Number one, digitalization. I think the youngs have proven it, that it can be done. Yeah, whether, I mean, during MCO, we have, I saw young men come to my house and send vegetables and fruits and so on, or the BPK, you know, using some ICT apps to sell their fish and so on. So that has to be nurtured, you know, that has to be nurtured, and you have to come up with a proper startups. Invite the youngs to come up with stuff. I believe startups can help this. Number two, I still believe in community group or community-based effort. There's no other way for farmers to improve their countervailing powers to face the strong mills in the case of paddy, to face the strong grinders in the case of cocoa, to face the strong mills in the case of oil palm and rubber. It's true for them to group together, right? When you have a large number, at least you can bargain better. You have the big quantity and so on. I still believe that co-ops is the best model for our farmers to move or to strengthen their bargaining power.
It's 11 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you.
Prof. Jamuri,
Yeah.
I want to respond to the second point just now about the food waste, post-harvest losses. I think the data indicated that also in the chat just now, that about 20-25% that we are basically experiencing post-harvest losses. But I think this is boiled down to two factors at the farm level actually. So you see, what we are having now is that, you know, the farmers basically are still using the same technology. But farmers like in Thailand or in other countries has been using a better technology in farm production. That's number one. Number two, because of the farmers that we have actually. That's why I think moving forward, we cannot afford to have, I mean, we have the farmers, it's okay to have them, but I think they will exit naturally later. But I think the issue is entrepreneurship, I think. Yeah? That's why in UPM, we have this program called Entrepreneurship Incubation Program. I think we need a lot of our farmers as entrepreneurs, as producers. I mean, if we don't want to call them farmers, we call them as agro-entrepreneurs. I think if we have these entrepreneurs who have running the production of food production, just like a businessman, of course, they will take care of the quality and using the appropriate technology, modern technology. Then, of course, the post-harvest losses would be much less. But as long as we have the current farmers, the current producers, the current technology, of course, the post-harvest losses is still maintained about 20-25%. So I think if we can minimize the post-harvest losses, then of course more food is available. Yeah? So that is my response to the second point. So I think there is one question in the chat. How can we improve the purchases of cooperative in terms of a small machine? I think probably this question was directed to Fatima. Anyway, I would like to respond on this. As I said just now, of course, when talking about food production, of course, the proponent of free trade, or I mean, there shouldn't be intervention by the government, by the authority. The more we intervene, I mean, talking about there will be a lot of deadweight losses in economics, deadweight losses, a lot of high cost to the consumers, everything. But the thing is, I still believe, meaning that although there is a lot of deadweight losses, but I think as far as food production, I think we need not only, as I said just now, private optimality, but also we need a social optimality. Therefore, I think to encourage the cooperative to purchase all this, there must be a fiscal or monetary incentive given to them initially. Because for me, the return in food investment, I mean, investment in small machine also is investment in food production, is talking about social return rather than return. We don't call them subsidy, we call them incentive, because this is what's happening in developed countries, when I was a student over there, of course, there are a lot of policies talking about land retirement, deficit payment, or talking about trade policy, tariff, quota, everything. Everything is in place, and until now, actually. So they call this as, of course, to promote their food production. My response.
Assalamualaikum.
Ya. Okey.
Ya. Okey, boleh?
Okey.
Boleh. Assalamualaikum. Saya Wan Ali. Wan Ali. Topik-topik hari ini amat relevan dengan sejarah hidup saya. Saya dulunya bekerja dengan tembakau dan berpindah buat pertanian sendiri dan bekerja dengan supply chain ini MAFC, Malaysian Agri-Food, yang mana relevan sangat dengan topik hari ini. Semasa di Burma, saya nak share, saya 10 tahun di sana, kerajaan sana dia ada 3 atau 4 strategic crop to make sure food supply dia cukup. Semasa saya pergi sana, stok makanan beras dia cukup untuk 3 tahun. Di mana kerajaan dictate, farmers kena tanam benda ni, kena tanam padi dan tak boleh tanam benda lain. Itu adalah amalan orang Myanmar lah. Tapi kita di sini tak boleh buat macam tu kan. Yang kedua, yang saya nak menarik perhatian sikit, kita masih lagi mengimport kubis dari Indonesia. Kita mengimport kubis dari Indonesia. Bila saya pergi Indonesia, saya melawat ladang kubis dia. Bukannya ladang yang tersusun teratur sangat. Dia ada integrator dia yang collect dan hantar sini. Dan sebab kos pengeluaran dia murah, dianya kompetitif untuk datang ke Malaysia. Dan satu lagi poin yang relevan untuk food safety kita, di mana salah satu sebab MAFC ditubuhkan di bawah Khazanah Nasional adalah to change the landscape of horticulture di Malaysia, di mana Pak Lah dulu bagi 500 juta kepada MAFC to start the business lah. Jadi MAFC has a supply chain company, CCN. Sekarang ni masih ada yang jual, yang bawa ke Tesco apa tu, cold chain network itu. Itu hak milik MAFC. Saya, when I left there, I was the head of procurement. I negotiated to buy food, to buy vegetable and fruits from farmers. Di sini kita audit the farm. Ini yang masalah wet market, tidak audit the farm. We audit the farm, what chemical they use, what is the post harvest and what is the harvesting interval dia, supaya ia menjamin food itu safe untuk consumer. In the end, we pack. Kalau you pergi di supermarket, ada brand kita, Licious brand. Itu kita jamin. Ada yang ready to eat pun, salad apa semua tu, boleh makan terus sebab selamat. Itu adalah langkah MAFC untuk menukarkan lagi landscape horticulture kita. Tetapi malangnya, kita fokus on up market, hypermarket, supermarket. The big chunk of the market is still wet market, pasar borong, pasar Selayang, Serdang, di mana mereka tidak, bila ambil supply itu tidak check benda ni semua. Kita pernah sekali kena saman oleh Kementerian Kesihatan sebab bila check di MRL tinggi, so kena saman. So saya rasa pihak yang berkenaan like Department of Agriculture semua tu patut enforce. Banyak penanam-penanam tidak mengikut praktis yang betul. Ada yang hari ni sembuh racun, esok jual. Ada juga macam tu. So itu saja buat kali ni.
Okey, terima kasih. Ada respons?
Assalamualaikum, Prof. Jamuri.
Ya.
Saya sebenarnya tidak begitu apa orang kata memandang positif kepada usaha-usaha yang top down ini ya. Sejarah menunjukkan kita banyak kegagalan dan banyak rent-seeking untuk projek-projek yang top down ni. Sebagai contohnya NFC ya, dan projek-projek lain termasuklah MAFC.
Iyalah.
Dia tidak mewujudkan apa orang kata organic growth. Organic growth bermaksud petani itu yang tanam sendiri, petani yang tanggung risiko, petani yang mengalami pengalaman supaya dia tahu bangun dan bangun, duduk, bangun, jatuh. Jadi lama-lama dia akan menjadi kuat. Bagaimana ditunjukkan oleh petani Cina di Cameron Highland. Kita mahu petani yang begitu. Jadi kalau kita buat itu pun ya, kita lihat bagaimana MAFC diberi ratus-ratusan ekar untuk betik dan mereka tumpas disebabkan oleh satu penyakit sahaja. Tak ke apa tu orang kata tak betul tu. Dan dia tidak ada orang kata trickle down effect kepada petani kecil. Tapi kalaulah duit milion-milion itu diberikan kepada petani dari segi extension yang baik, baju yang bagus, latihan kepada petani, latihan ICT lah, latihan sustainable farming lah dan sebagainya, saya yakin produktiviti mereka akan meningkat dan dalam satu masa panjang mereka menjadi petani yang berjaya. Itu pandangan saya. Terima kasih.
Saya setuju dengan Profesor Dr. Fatimah tadi. Tapi yang saya nak tekankan di sini, kita kena tukar landscape kita dari segi usaha untuk menjaga keselamatan tu. Memang banyak GLC apa semua tu boleh jadi banyak yang tidak berbaloi pun. They have because of different agenda. Tapi kalau kita tengok di Thailand, saya pernah melawat satu pasar dia, saya rasa Prof ada melawat Talak Thai.
Ya.
Talak Thai is being run by the runner tu bukan kerajaan, it's a private sector.
Yeah.
Private sector. Tapi run quite well. So kita boleh tiru cara dia juga. Talak Thai market is a big market. Saya cadangkan siapa-siapa pergi, orang TF Net biasa pergi dengan saya dulu. Sana. Okey, terima kasih.
Tadi ada poin yang baik saya rasa. Di samping kita nak kekalkan petani kecil ni, kita memang selalu menyokonglah petani kecil. Various supports and measures have been given. Tapi adakah petani kecil ni masih pada takuk lama ke? They are still traditional, they are still doing the old ways, traditional technology, and Prof Nasir tadi bercakap tentang entrepreneurship. What is happening to the young ones? Adakah golongan muda, petani-petani muda ni sudah mula masuk dengan secara efektif untuk menerajui pertanian masa depan?
Okay, terima kasih Prof. Moving forward, in my opinion, there are basically three pillars or three parameters, we want to call it, in order to improve our food security situation, especially in terms of our increasing our production, since our bill is very high and so forth. Number one, in terms of course, as I said just now, in terms of policy, conducive policy. Second, in terms of technology. But if we have a good policy, a good technology, with all the incentives to adopt the technology, but if we don't have the person who run the farm, then of course we cannot realize as far as how to improve the food production. So I think entrepreneurship, keusahawanan, I think is very, very important component. So I think the farmers that we have currently, of course, it's okay for them to run because I think they will eventually will be a natural exit. But the thing we have to nurture, we have to produce more of entrepreneurship. Of course, in UPM, there are some of my colleagues here as a participant here. Since 2012, we have been producing entrepreneurs. university produce entrepreneurs. At the time I was the dean of the Faculty of Agriculture. Of course, when we talk to the people, we want to produce entrepreneurs. I think people laugh at us. You are doctor something, professor. You are not entrepreneur. How can you produce entrepreneurs? But the thing is, of course, as a lecturer, I cannot produce entrepreneurs because I am not entrepreneurs on my own. So, of course, I have to work with industry, relevant industry, and also to work with relevant agencies, and also with AgroBank, everything. So, universities, government agencies, and also the entrepreneurs, existing entrepreneurs, in order to develop entrepreneurs. So since 2012, we have been producing more than 400 participants, but our success rate is around 58%. For me, 58% is already successful because not everybody that we train can become entrepreneurs. So, of course, we have to monitor everything. And mind you, some have a sale of 6 million a year, 6 million a year, the sales. Of course, average was 600, 700,000 a year. So I think moving forward, we have to have a lot of these universities. Of course, universities normally we produce graduate to be scientists, to be working industry, to be working in the government agencies. I think that's no longer true. I mean, that's still true, still true. Of course, we have to be more than that. We, universities, also responsible to produce entrepreneurs. Unless the food production is run by entrepreneurs. When I say entrepreneurs are those who have, those who want to take risks, want to adopt technology, run the business like, have a business plan and everything. Then of course moving forward with increasing population, improvement income, then of course the food production will go nowhere. But the thing is, the crux of it, other than policy, other than technology, is the entrepreneurs. I think we have to have a lot of program to produce entrepreneurs. But the thing is, not many people can become entrepreneurs. Our selection process is very, very stringent. We have to have interview, we have to have psychometric and everything. And yet, with all this interview, with all this psychometric tests, working with the AgroBank for them to present the business plan, everything, only 58% successful. When I say successful, they are running the business now. We have the company. After 6 months, they have to have the company and everything. So I think we have to have this kind of program. Of course, the government basically have to have more of budget on this. We got the budget from the Ministry of IoT.
Okay. Fatima, you want to add?
We have allowance of 1,000 ringgit. But the thing later, probably we have to charge them in order for them to be in our program. This is my response. Entrepreneurship is very, very important. Thank you.
Okay. Old farmers. Of course, there are old farmers who are at my age. They are, I don't know, they are burdened. They have been farming for years. They have contributed to the country. So don't say that they are no longer usable. They are not don't have the energy. They have contributed a lot. Let them go or gratefully, respect them. And you'll be surprised if you go to Cameron Highland, the farmers are as old as me. And their knowledge, oh my God, they just can look at the plant and they know, as the Malay said, sekilas ikan beralih, dia tahu jantan betina. To that extent. And the farmers in Sekinchan, for example, they or in Mada, for example, they look at the paddy plant, they know the disease or the health of the plants, because they have seen those trees years and years. So the what we call the tacit knowledge and the intrinsic knowledge of plant is very rich in them, right? Except that, as Prof. Nasir mentioned, now is the era of technology. Land is limited, quality of land is going down, water is toxic, right? But demand is increasing, so it's about time that we go for green technology, or green method. And the best people to do it are the young scientists, the young technologies, and so on. They should come up with all sorts of innovations to solve this problem. Not mentioning the climate change or not. So pandemic opens up a new reset button for us to do a better agriculture, a better food production. It's a combination of technology, combination of the young entrepreneurs, and as well as Prof. Nasir mentioned, good farmers. It's okay to have old farmers. They have lots of insight, they have experience, but tap their knowledge and mix it with the young generation's knowledge. We will do better. I don't think the farmers in Thailand are all very young and sexy. They are, they're as old as me, and yet they can produce for the world. I know I went to wholesale market in Bangkok. The export of serai, you can see one big row of serai, one big row of halia. And they don't need estates, they don't need big farms, they are just smallholders. But organization, the extension, remember their ministry is Ministry of Agriculture and Extension. That shows the emphasis on agriculture as well as extension. But look at us, we don't even have a center of excellence for extension. So please, guys, I want to say this, please set up an extension department or extension center as a center of excellence so that we can do research, we can come up with innovation and so on, and we can come up with extension staff which are first degree and so sorry to digest, but this is very important. So it's a combination of old farmers, young new ideas, young new brains, young new bodies, as well as technology. Thank you very much.
Any more questions?
Assalamualaikum. My name is Abdul Razak from SIDS Malaysia. May I add a few things? And first and foremost, thank you very much, the panel, for sharing this wonderful session. I think it warrants a lot of attention given to farming. 3 points, if I may just add to the overall discussion. One is, obviously, food production is very, very big. Yeah, I'm a farmer for 16 years. Right now, we're moving into empowering younger ones to look at how one could take seriously into production of food without succumbing to the issues that we, old farmers. I'm still young, despite my age. I think what Professor Fatima is saying, yeah, we can still be sexy with production of food. Yeah, but 2 points that I want to stress here is we seem to forget about the natural processes of production of food. We always look at technology, but we forget that nature provides the basic fundamental of how we can actually survive. So with technology given the attention to, I think permaculture way, natural way of production of food must not be forgotten. Yeah, the old ways and the new ways must combine. But what are we doing with our own production of food individually? Me, you, the people that's listening to us. How are we looking at food and how we are producing our own food? Yeah. I think last point is the same sentiments like Professor Nasir and Professor Fatima mentioned. When I first started farming 16 years ago, I hear the old timers talk about 20 years ago, blah, 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 and the issues are still pertaining today. How do we still look at production of our own food? I was a goat farmer for 16 years. 16 years ago, they talk about 90% importation. Today is still 90%. So what are we talking about? So I think the younger ones and us need to look at food. How can we stop this? Bottom line, how we can stop this? Regenerative approach must be seriously look into it from community based up. No longer should we rely and whether we call it empowering or whether we blame the government or we hand it to the government to say solve it. No, it must be me, it must be you, it must be everyone else in community based driven projects. Then entrepreneurs can come out. Then people who are not entrepreneur but servicing social requirements, social needs can be addressed. I think it must be addressed in this manner rather than trying to go around the bandwagon and say authorities, subsidies, blah, blah, blah. But I think it's you and me. Thank you.
But food security is a strategic thing to be left to the government. I must say has a very strong role in terms of coordinating and also planning for the food sector. How do you see the recent budget? Does it put emphasis or address some of the issues that have been talking about, and what is it there in the 12 Malaysia plan, for example, that the food sector will be driven more aggressively because of the strategic nature of the food industry? Yeah, Fatima.
Yeah, I wrote an article in The Edge, and I said that until and when the structural problems are addressed, all the problems that we discussed earlier, our agriculture sector will not change. I mentioned about the need to get our frontliners in agriculture, and that is extension agents. I think farmers are rational, whether they are old or young, they are rational, and we saw that farmers are moving towards diversification, right? Under a stress environment, pandemic, without little fertilizer and labor problem, they diversify. You know, they try to plant other crops. They do other jobs, try to sell by themselves and so on. They are rational people, and they know what is best for their life. So, but we need to support that, as mentioned by Prof. Jamhuri. Lots of supports for farmers to help themselves. And that means by giving that good advices, right? Good advices, and that is through extension. It is not difficult. I think if we mobilize again, revamp again, re-energize our extension agent, I believe within 3 years, I think our yield will increase. And I think cash supports are needed, right? And lots of supports in terms of getting their produce sold to the right market, or improving their network of marketing so that their produce reach the consumers. These are little effort that they will help them to survive the situation. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add. I think as far as tourism budget, I think they have. I mean, of course, budget is a yearly kind of belanjawan. It's not really a policy per se. But anyway, the budget touched on the improving food availability, accessibility, especially. Dia ada, for example, bantuan sara hidup, bantuan prihatin rakyat, meningkatkan insentif keluaran getah, subsidi harga padi, subsidi insentif tanaman padi, baja, dalam saluran hidup nelayan, all this. So, and then of course they have kebun community, pelaksanaan organik, all this. So I think in general, as far as the budget is concerned, they touch on how to improve food accessibility, especially by the B40, and also how to improve yearly in terms of how can we have more of food production, increasing production. But I think, of course, they have also touched on entrepreneurship, everything in the inclusivity of movement, everything, but not mentioned specifically in terms of how can we train more of agro entrepreneurs. So I think this is more of human capital building. I think is more important rather than giving cash here and there. Of course, that's good, no problem, it's good. But I think we should have a dedicated program on developing kind of agro entrepreneurs. Hopefully, they will touch in the RM12, and also in terms of the what kind of incentive of technology. Because when you talk about technology here, it's talking about automation, mechanization. Okay, people talking about drone, talking about these glass houses, everything. This is what actually, of course, people will say we have so many land. Of course. But then, of course, the issue here is that how we want to increase productivity. If we have more controlled environment, I think our productivity can increase. So I think as far as this issue is not touched in the budget, but I can understand budget is just yearly kind of belanjawan. But anyway, I think the budget is more concerned about of B40 capacity to purchase food, and also a bit here and there on how to improve production, but not in terms of strategic move in terms of and also adoption of technology. That's my comment generally.
Okay, thank you.
Prof. Shamuri, can I say something?
Yeah, Larry Wong, yeah, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Prof. Nasir and Prof. Fatima, for your usual stimulating, lucid, and pretty insightful presentations. Building on what Prof. Nasir emphasized according to in terms of education, I think that is one of the key things we should continue to look at. Not only on food security, but in terms of future agriculture. I think future agriculture is going to be so different from now. So it will both be education and human resource development in terms of how do you handle disruptions like this, and more so prepare not only agripreneurs, but also for government servants, people who are going to man the public sector, as well as people who have ambition to lead the country and act as politicians. And increasingly, they would need to have a better worldview rather than just look at insular within the country itself. Since I have the floor, can I just stretch my luck and ask, give two observations and two questions, pose two questions. Firstly, I think in terms of this system's approach and interconnectedness, etc., one of the key things which is talked about down there would be this whole question of interconnectedness arising from that and building in a behavioral dimension in terms of polycentricity. Our problem seems to be we are very much either production-centric or consumer-centric, but we leave out everything in between supply and value chains, as it were. So this emphasis on polycentricity and how it all hangs together will be interesting. And that's why I think there's value in to mentally think about it using your system dynamics, and whether you believe to do it or not, you can do it separately and synthesize everything together. Secondly, we seems to be having a dichotomy between the private and public sector, as well as dichotomy between small and big operators. I think increasingly these are going to be blurred. And the trick is how do you link them together and coexist and at least synergism. Two questions, quick ones would be, it always fascinated me, why is it in Malaysia, are we just being stubborn, or why is it in Malaysia that we don't consider edible palm oil as food? All right, if you do so, then we can easily and proudly proclaim Malaysia to be a next exporter of food, and that we are actually feeding the world rather than depending on the world to feed us. You know, for a small country, open economy like Malaysia, there's a lot of things we can harness from this by saying that we are actually feeding the world. And because palm oil is part of the thing which feeds the world, we will deflect all this attack which people are talking about in terms of palm oil. Just to get your feedback, what do you all think about this? Because you're long-term players in this, and you've looked at all this pretty carefully. Secondly, the orientation seems to be very much country-specific, is insular. And yet, when we talk about new dimensions of food security, response to COVID, etc., it's going to be a regional and global response. Do you see, in terms of this, what are the practicality? How can we activate something which is a regional solution to food security or COVID response? Food security, basically, using COVID as a wake-up call, that these are going to be disruption, and how do you handle it? Whether you do it at ASEAN +3, or some new idea which people are proposing under the rubric of food diplomacy, that to actually form a coalition of interested parties, which for lack of a better name, International Food Security Coalition, which helps reach out and help the poorer parts. I think the most at risk would be island economies in Asia Pacific. Because of climate change and so on and so forth. And that is a general trend, but even short-term disruptions, how do you handle that? I think I'll stop there, and I look forward to and once again, thank you for sharing so freely your insights. Thank you.
Fatima, you want to respond first?
Okay. Hi Larry, as usual, you always give a provocative questions. Let me try. Okay. Yeah, since we have our ex-students here, I would like to mention what Dr. Isabel Sakok mentioned about agriculture. You cannot do agriculture overnight, all right?
Right.
Because it involves nature, it involves land, it involves whatever, all those natural resources. So, but once you achieve it, it's like a slow magic, you know, slow magic. It takes time. China did it very well. They don't need estates for food, guys. Just smallholders, but sub transformation in terms of technology, ownership, and so on. Vietnam did it since Doi Moi 1986, and look at them. So there is hope there. So I have proposed many times food first policy. Emphasize on food because food help to improve capital, human capital, good lifestyle, providing, enhancing local biodiversity, and so on. So it's worthwhile looking. But guys, remember, rubber is gone except for top gloves. Cocoa is gone. All palm will reach its limits by 2023, 6.5 million hectare. We don't know what will happen after that. So we have lost the shines for industrial crop, right? So we only have food to focus on now, unless we find a new industrial golden crop. Okay, so this is best time for food. Okay, that's one point. Talking about interconnectedness or circular causality or feedback relationship, let me bring back the cocoa case, because there is no feedback between the processing and the production. The symbiotic relationship is needed so that the industry can survive. You look at oil palm from farmers to mill to refineries to, you know, to exporters. It's all integrated. That's why they do very well. But if you look at cocoa, we have farmers one side and grinders don't care. Farmers are not integrated with grinders. So in the event of a shock, the farmers go off, right? So we need an integrated symbiotic relationship between all the players in the supply chain system. In the case of paddy, farmers are trapped in the middle because there are big giants beyond farms, and of course input sector is controlled by someone. So you expect farmers to fare better? Not so. Yeah. So structure feedback relationship is important. Okay, Larry. Of course, we are the largest producer. We are number 2 now. We have lost the competitiveness to other countries. But Larry, of course, we don't eat oil palm every day. You eat oil palm every day, you get fat. But remember what UNICEF say: 1 in 5 of our children are stunted. So we need fish, we need milk, we need meat, we need fruit, we need good fresh vegetables. But these commodities, these products are imported. And because of AP, we still import that miserable cabbage from Indonesia and China. We can't produce our own cabbage. We have our cabbage, but not enough. Our cabbage is green, but the Chinese cabbage are white, and they don't taste good. But because of AP, yeah, it's still there. So our cabbage industry doesn't progress. So of course we get A for oil palm, but we get F for milk or meat on all the good food, good fruits. We are just miserable, right? Of course, if you look at the figures by Prof. Nasir, our self-sufficiency level of rambutan, durian, langsat, and so on are above 100, but they are seasonal and they don't reach us sometimes, right? Because of the marketing system. So it's good to consider food security as a basket of good. And remember, I share this information because I saw in Norway as well as in Japan, is good food for their children first. All the good foods are tailored towards the kids and population first. Look at Japan, they protect their food industry so that the good food are for their people first. But in our case, we eat the residual one, the poor sayur or vegetables not laku in Singapore, you give it to our people. So I don't know, of course, market economy rules, but we need in the long term good food for our children and our people. Right, talking about trade, as I did mention, I think many FAO experts, IFRI or Thomas Redden mentioned the need to make sure to maintain the flow of international trade. The moment you restrict it or you have your own NTBs, the others will react. Remember 2008, everybody protect themselves. In the end, there's no rice. there are enough rice, but because everybody is protective, there is no rice in the market. So we still need to make sure that the international trade dynamics continues to have our supply of food. Thank you. Over.
Thank you, Fatima. Nasir, you want to respond?
Thank you, Dr. Larry. I think Dr. Larry and us has been together for so long. It's good to hear that we are still active.
Yeah.
If we include palm oil as food, I think because palm oil alone, our export earning is about close to 80 billion, 80 billion ringgit. Of course, they can probably say that, we are a food surplus country. Just that somehow the definition of food is something that we can consume directly. Of course, we don't consume palm oil directly, mainly for cooking oil. That's why palm oil is not food. But it's just statistically. I think second point is very important, Dr. Larry. I think just like the scope I was informed for this webinar is how our country can improve our food security situation. But certainly, and I very, very agree with that. We have to work regionally to improve our food security situation. But then, of course, other than Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, everything, we are basically facing the situation of food deficit countries. So I think if we can work together regionally, I think we can improve our food security. What I'm trying to say, I agree with Dr. Larry's comment. Just that the scope I was informed, just how can be our country to improve food security. I mean, our own first, rather than regional. But regional cooperation certainly is very, very important. Thank you, Prof.
Prof, can I have a rejoinder on this?
Okay.
We need your opinion also.
Yeah. I think it's crucial. The way I look at this is this. Why are we shooting ourselves in the foot in relation to palm oil? Internationally, people will consider oils and fats as food. Why are we so stubborn that we deny ourselves this? Right? FAO considers fats and oils as food. As the last time I looked at it, World Bank also considered it as food. And even IFPRI considers it as food. So why are we self-denying this? And so just look at it side by side. The plus side which you can get from this, I can understand there's a ministry definition because ministry on agri-food and the other one is under primary industries and so on and so forth. But reacting just like COVID, we need to react as a nation. As a nation, any time of the day, I would take it that I feed the world is a better slogan than to say I depend on the world to feed me. Right? But the other advantage you would have would be this will deflect a lot of the attacks on your palm oil, right? Because whether you like it or not, you cannot change 6 million tons of 6 million acres of hectares of land which is committed to this. And rather than lobbying here, lobbying there, just by a definitional thing which we inflicted ourselves anyway, nobody told us to go and define palm oil as non-food. Right, so this might not be the thing, but I just wanted to bring this up so that hopefully your cluster and because this probably have got a collection of brains in the country itself, a private sector, public sector, academia. Maybe you want to take this a bit further and look at it, because I thought we are really doing a lot of injustice to our own country, right? And maybe have a relook. Don't have to agree with me. Just have a look and what are the pros and cons of doing this, and how do we do it very nicely, get the various people in and have a very articulated narrative which we have that is consistent throughout. I rest my case. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. But why are we not following the international organization in terms of definitions of food? Any more comments? I think the time is running out. Organizers, how are we doing?
I think we should stop now, bro. It's already it's almost 11:45. Yeah.
45, 15 minutes of our time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe we can wrap up. Yeah.
Okay. There are a lot of things to wrap up. We have discussed a lot of things from looking at food security issues, and then related to pandemic supply loop and all that. And we have discussed a lot of questions regarding policy, structural, technical, and also institutional setup. But it seems that we will still be grapple with this food security issue. Some countries have taken, especially in Japan, taken food security as a very strategic issue, and they have allocated major resources in terms of land, in terms of funding, in terms of investment, in terms of agencies and all that, to coordinate very effectively on food production, consumption, and also processing. As the speaker, as the questions mentioned, we still lack this coordination, and also the issue of interconnectivity between the various subsectors, I think, is still needs to be improved. And with the coming of digitalization, I think this is another challenge that our entrepreneurs, food entrepreneurs, will be facing in the future. And I hope this discussion have generated a lot of points to be considered. I hope some of the policy makers hear us, and maybe Fatima and Nasir, you are in the committee of the food agriculture sector, and maybe you can still voice your opinion together, people at the policy level. So I take this opportunity to end the webinar at this point. I thank Academy Professor Malaysia for inviting me to moderate, and I thank the panelists, Fatima and Nasir, and also the commenters for making this webinar a very lively discussion and also engagement. Thank you.